For those of you who were here with us last week, we embarked upon visioning, simply entering a meditative state and asking Spirit to reveal to us in a language that we understand what is for our highest and best 2014. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning. That's our beginning of this year. Simply pausing to ask Spirit, what is for my highest and best? Being open and receptive to what that truth is. And then taking that truth, taking those patterns, taking that insight that has been received, and then using that insight to go forth. Versus, what do I think I want this year? And going through a magazine and picking out what we want. We decided that we were really going to take another route. Which is interesting for me because as we begin to look at this year's readings and what we're embarking upon this year, is we're reading the Science of Mind book in 1 year. And many of you got these last week, and if you didn't get one last week, you can pick some up today. We have some outside, and we'll have them in the family room tonight. And what we're doing is just every day, just reading just a few pages, sometimes just a few paragraphs. Sometimes it's just even a meditation for the day that's taken right out of the book. And before you know it, we'll just check off each day, and voila. This time next year, we could say, I read that Science of Mind book, the whole thing. That reminds me of back in the day, that old commercial. I can't believe I ate the whole thing. We just dated ourselves, but it's okay. So it was before your time, huh? I knew it, you youngster, you. So Rosedale read to you a little bit from today's reading, which is in the beginning. And of course, you know, the talk title for tonight is In the Beginning. Because there is what we know of and what we call a beginning. But technically, there's no beginning and no end. There simply is life. There simply is God. There simply is this great reality. Yet, in order for us to grasp and or comprehend this idea and this allness of God, of this energetic, of this spirit, of this creative intelligence, we get to just kind of put it in a language that we understand. And what we understand is in the beginning. Because we're telling a story. And so in the beginning, there was simply only this life energy, this source. There was only this creative intelligence that we simply call God. Sometimes we call it love. Sometimes we call it the great reality. We have many, many names for it. Sometimes, we hear people say Mother, Father, God. Sometimes we just make it so personal for ourselves that we give it the name love, or we give it the name of, hey, pops, hey, moms. We just really personalize it. However, what we're simply talking about is this life energy, this source energy that has always existed, will always exist, will always and forever be. It is unchanging. And what we get to do as a spiritual community is we get to examine what it is that we really believe. And we get to do it through the Science of Mind textbook, which I love because a textbook is studied. It's our Science of Mind text. So it's not like, tonight I'm just going to read a story. But in fact, if we take it seriously, it is our textbook, so we get to study it, which means for me that I get to have my dictionary with me, I get to have my highlighter and a pen or a pencil so that I can underline stuff, I can look up words, even words that I think I know. Sometimes when I look them up, they have a whole nuance, a whole new meaning to them that I can apply in a whole new way. And as I was with our reading for today, this week, it really dawned on me that what I've been saying over and over again just has a really new and fresh meaning. And here's what I usually say. I go, through some act upon itself, through some act of involution, Spirit, Source, the great I Am presence has created everything out of itself. It's not like once upon a time there was God and a junkyard or God and the garage, guys, where you go to work and you kind of create and start making all kinds of things, right? And women too, It's not like there was God and something else, but there was always this great I Am presence. And it was simply being. But it wanted to express and begin to know itself. And through some act of involution, it has created everything. And the key for us as spiritual people, when we really take a look at what it is that we believe, why this key is so important and why I'm so happy that out of everything that we've read this week so far, that this falls on tonight, I think is no coincidence, because so many times it's easy for us to believe that we are separate from the life that God is. And if we simply ever, maybe even all year long, if all we ever studied and anchored and really drove in to our consciousness, if all we ever did was just really repeat and recognize and know for ourselves that God created everything out of itself, therefore our life is the life of God, period. We could stop right there. We could have all the success that we've ever dreamed of. We could fully live. We can be free of all discord, which is what Ernest Holmes talks about, is our goal, to be free of all discord. If all we ever really, really took in, and I love this because in sign language, this is learn. Do that with me. Learn. So we take it from the book or from the pages, and it's almost like entering it into our consciousness, into our brains, into our minds. If all we ever learned, or all we ever knew and took in and just simply opened up our consciousness, the little door, because for some of us it's squeaky, we haven't opened it in a while. It's like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And simply place in, at that moment, the life that I am is the life that God is. And that there's nothing that can possibly separate that. That is what we believe. That is what we get to come to know day in, day out. Is that in the beginning, there was God, this life force, this life energy, and it created everything through an act of involution. Therefore, our life is the life of God. Our life is the way that God expresses in human form. What questions do you have? Yes. Yeah, thank you for that, because I use it all the time, and I don't know if I make it up or if I hear Michael Beckwith making it up, and I use it. So evolution begins with the E, and evolution is this like something happens outside. The E usually means external. The I usually means internal. So there's this creation that happens outside the external, this evolution. However, when I say involution, I'm speaking about through some act within God's self, because God is everywhere present, fills up this room, fills up all that there is, all there ever is God. So there's nothing that could possibly be outside of the life of God. So through some act upon itself, which means the creation in of itself, and then that creation is within the allness that God is. It's not outside of God, but all that has been created lives and has its beingness in God. In God, not outside of God. So thank you for that, because sometimes I just talk and I'm not, so I appreciate that. So some act of some internal creation, and that creation still has its existence within the allness of God. So we live and have our beingness in God as God. Earlier this evening, we were in the kitchen, a few of us were in the kitchen, and we were just kind of talking about all the ways that we think sometimes we're separate from God just because we have physicality. And we think that the trees are different, or the stars are different, or that we're different, or that because we have been encapsulated in these beautiful physical fleshy bodies, we believe that we're separate. And of course, we came up with all these wonderful ways to kind of say, well, hey, a hand, I can be the pinky, or you can be the thumb, or the ring finger, or the middle finger, or the pointer, or whichever finger, but it's still part of the hand. It's still the oneness, even though it might express differently. Or like our physical bodies, we have different organs, but it's still part of the oneness of the body. Or like the sun is the source and the rays that come forth. It's still that energetic. It's still all part of the one. And even though we might be sitting in different seats and in different chairs, and, these beautiful plants are still who and what God is. The trees are who and what God is. Life, the birds, all of creation is who and what God is, because God created all of it out of itself, because all there ever was God. So imagine us, day in, day out, just coming back. It reminds me of the song by Ricky Byers-Beckwith, Go Back to the Beginning. Go back to the beginning. Like when your day is getting crazy, when you're thinking in separation, when things are just kind of going a little bit haywire, just go back to the beginning. And what's the beginning? In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. Okay. That might not bring a whole lot of calm and solace to anybody. But when we go back to the beginning, then we can at least go forth with the story a little bit. God created everything out of itself. The heavens, the earth, the water. It moved upon itself. Just by knowing, just by a single thought, it is made manifest. That's just the nature of God. That's just how life works. So, if I go back to the beginning when I'm having a rough day, or a rough moment, or a rough hour, or a rough conversation, and I go back to in the beginning God, and move gently into God created everything out of itself, therefore my life is the life that God is. See, it's not enough. Like our book says on page 292, it's not enough to just simply say there's one power, one life, and that life is God. That's not enough. It's enough when we say, and that life is my life now, because that's the truth and that's the reality. Is that we cannot leave ourselves out of the equation. Otherwise, we're leaving God out of the equation itself. Because God is who and what we are. We are the way God expresses itself in human form. So that which is the truth of God is the truth of us. So what are some of the qualities that you equate with God? Call some out for me. Love, passion, peace, kindness, abundance, forgiveness, joy, tolerance, inclusion. Everything that we equate with God, a loving, powerful God, that is the truth of who we are. You know the saying, the fruit don't fall far from the tree. You have a tree, and it's abundant, and it's just hanging low with fruit, and when the fruit's ready to go, it doesn't fly way over there. It just drops. Boop. 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 I love my interactive family. So we are that which God is. So the love, the abundance, the wholeness, the peace, the joy that God is, we are. And that's why it's so important to even just begin there, to understand that, to really begin to anchor that into our daily living, so that we might live from this place of right where I am, the allness of God is. That potentiality is right here. I am the beautiful and magnificent way that God shows up on this planet. And as it is the truth for me, it is a truth for each and every one of us. We are the magnificent way that God shows up in human form. No matter how ugly you might think somebody looks, no matter how you might judge yourself, no matter how you might judge others, no matter how you might listen to somebody cut somebody else down, or you may do that yourself, no matter what, each and every one of us are the beautiful and magnificent way that God shows up on this planet as us. And that little human judgment doesn't even really matter, because it cannot separate us from the life of God. That little human judgment does not even matter, because it cannot separate your life from the life of God. So, at school, when somebody does some name calling, it doesn't really matter, because nobody can separate us from the life of God. So, in relationship, when you're having that little tiff with your beloved, it doesn't really matter, because the both of you are the life of God. So, in the workplace, when they say, thank you very much, your services are no longer needed, it doesn't really matter, because your life is the life of God. And that which is true of God is true about you in each and every moment. Not just sometimes, not most of the time, but all the time. Period. Period. And when we forget is when we feel the discord. When we forget this truth, and when we go around thinking that we're not who we really are, that's when we have the problems. It kind of reminds me of Superman. You know, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman, who can bend the course of mighty rivers, bend steel with his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter from a great metropolitan newspaper, fights the never-ending battle of truth, justice, and the American way, right? We're kind of like that in the sense, when we forget who we really are, we forget that we're super God, that we are God. And we're over here kind of disguising ourselves as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter. You know, how is it that we play small? How is it that it's just, oh, I'm just a little sunshine, just living in Long Beach? No, are you kidding me? When you see me, you see God. When you see me, you see abundance. When you see me, you see joy. When we begin to really adopt and adapt that manner of thinking and that way of being, we don't need a phone booth or a closet to rip off and be like, here I am to save the day. No, we can always allow our God self to shine. And we can really live from that place. And that place, beloveds, is not necessarily a place of conceit, being conceited, or being boastful. It's just simply being in that place of I know who I am and I know who you are, because we're one. We're not the same, but we're one. God is expressing beautifully and magnificently as you. Look at all the beauty that there is in the variety and the difference on how God expresses. In the beginning, whenever we find ourselves in trouble, if we just go back to the beginning and recognize the truth of who we are and anchor that right now, anchor in the vision that has been revealed to us for us to simply be our grand and divine self more and more, we will find that we begin to really live our genuine life, really live our fulfilling lives, really find that there's nothing, no thing that can separate our life from the life of God. And that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. So we begin to simply separate ourselves from the things that keep us separate from our truth. Let us begin to separate ourselves from the things that keep us separate from our truth. Things like sky's the limit. No, it ain't. Things like I'm just this or just that. No, you're God expressing. Things like, oh, it's impossible. That's not the truth. There's an infinite possibility, and you have access to that. You have access to the one mind because it is who and what we are. And we can use it at any time for good. So begin to separate. If you have to do any separation, okay? If you just have to separate yourself from anything, separate yourself from the things, the thoughts, the ideas that separate you from the truth of who you are. All right? You like that, huh, Sunny Day? Let's take that into our quiet time right now. So the invitation is to simply clear your laps if you have anything in your laps. And we're just going to enter the silence for about 5 minutes or so. And what we're taking into the silence is this idea and this truth that God is all there is. God is all there is. God is all there is. And God has created everything out of itself. Therefore, our life, my life, is the life of God. And that which is true of God is my truth now, in this human form. And so now I simply allow myself to be separated from the things that separate me from this truth. And I simply anchor this truth right where I am, the allness of God is. And we allow ourselves to go within.